At the centre of this trial that we just saw were accusations that Donald Trump paid money to publications like the National Enquirer to shut down stories that could hurt his 2016 presidential bid. They're called catch and kill stories. Lachlan Cartwright is an Australian journalist who was working at the National Enquirer during that period. He was told that a former Playboy playmate, Karen McDougal, would be paid more than $225,000 to keep quiet about allegations that she had an affair with Mr Trump. Now, Mr Cartwright was in the courtroom when this guilty verdict was handed down. He joins me now. Lachlan, great to see you. First of all, what was it like sitting in that room?
G'day, Laura. It was a moment I will not ever forget. We were under the impression that the jury was done for the day. We were nearing up to 4:30, which is when we usually break. And we were under the impression that Judge Mershon, was going to bring the jury back to then give them the directions and then send them off. And instead, he said he had a note. And that note was that the jury had a verdict and they just needed 30 minutes more to complete some jury paperwork. So we were all surprised in the courtroom. We were sort of getting ready to pack up for the day. And then after that 30 minutes went by, the jury was led back out. And where I was sitting in the courtroom, I had a direct line of sight to the foreman. He stood up and the judge asked, "How do you find on the first charge of falsifying business records?" He said, "Guilty." And then he continued to repeat guilty 34 times as the judge asked about those 34 counts of falsifying business records.
And what was Donald Trump's reaction? Could you see his face?
So from where I was in the courtroom, security were blocking him, but from a screen in front of me, I could see his reaction, and he had his eyes closed for some of it, and then he sort of sat there, sort of steely-eyed. Until he was able to get up. And then the first person he interacted with was Eric Trump, his son, who kind of lunged at him, gave him a very strong handshake. And then he walked past all of the press in sort of a very sort of steely look and went out into the hallway to make those remarks that he was an innocent man.
Yeah, which we expected from him. I think that's fair enough to say. But Lachlan, sitting in the courtroom, knowing this case intimately, knowing how the American political system works, knowing how the American legal system works, what is your view of things today? Because Donald Trump came out straight away and said, this is, it's a show trial. Essentially, we've seen that the campaign poster being put out in the last 20 minutes. He's a political prisoner. That's how he's framing himself. Ironically, victim mentality.
And we were expecting this, because of what he's been posting on True Social, what the campaign has been ginning up. But what I can tell you, Laura, for being in that courtroom over the last 5 weeks, and I wish the public at Y could have seen what I saw, but sadly, because cameras are not allowed, but I saw an incredibly fair trial go on. Judge Mershon could not have been fairer to the defense. And the other thing I saw was 12 men and women, citizens of New York, who every day sat, listened intently. Some took notes. Others were incredibly, deeply engaged in hearing all of the evidence that went on, and then asked, in the last sort of 24 hours for that readback of David Pecker's testimony, which is key to the verdict that they reached, because David Pecker was integral in this scheme that was hatched with Michael Cohen and Donald Trump to purchase negative stories off the market while running negative stories about Trump's rivals. And that scheme, that conspiracy that went on to influence the 2016 election is really at the heart of this case.
Yeah, it certainly is. But Lachlan, I mean, there's a lot of debate, both here in Australia, right around the world, and it will be fierce in America, about whether, Donald Trump is being targeted politically, whether, the fairness of the trial itself, one thing, but whether this should have been brought on as felony and felony charges rather than, a misdemeanor. Do you have a view on that?
Well, I mean, I think the jury had more of a view than I can sort of illustrate right now. But, this case really did have at the heart of it this conspiracy to influence the 2016 election, and the result of that, we don't know for sure how much influence it did have, but the American public were none the wiser about stories involving Donald Trump and Stormy Daniels, stories involving Donald Trump and Karen McDougal, and the influence of the organization that I used to work for, American Media, which was really weaponized to help get Donald Trump elected. You've got to remember, Laura, in every checkout line, at every airport, in every Walmart in America, the National Enquirer stands there. And those covers with headlines like Hillary 3 months to live and Ted Cruz's dad was caught up in the assassination of JFK. Millions of Americans saw that on their way out of the checkout line. And that potentially had some impact into their thought process as they headed to the polls in 2016.
I wonder what your view of it is, now knowing what we know, because even if the American public did know about these catch and kill stories, did know about paying off a former playmate, paying off Stormy Daniels, what they did know just before the 2016 election was this grab her comment. They heard that, they saw that, and Donald Trump's vote seemed to go up. So here in 2024, ahead of the next presidential election, that no one would have predicted Donald Trump would be standing again or even have a red hot chance of it. I mean, isn't that all relevant?
Well, I can take you back to the 2016 election. In light of that Access Hollywood tape coming out, the campaign was incredibly concerned about any more negative stories, particularly negative stories that impacted on the female vote. And that's why, and we heard this in court in testimony from Michael Cohen, from David Pecker, from Hope Hicks, that is why the campaign was so concerned about the Stormy Daniels story getting out. And Donald Trump even mentioned that to Hope Hicks into 2017, that he was glad that that story had come off the market. They were incredibly concerned about losing female voters and incredibly concerned about the impact of the Stormy Daniels story. And as someone who was in court hearing the Stormy Daniels testimony, I can attest that testimony, that story would have been incredibly damaging if the public had have known that before the 2016 election, particularly off the light of the Access Hollywood grab by the P tape.
Anything else on your mind, Lachlan, this morning?
Look, it's been an extraordinary few weeks for me, Laura, obviously having lived this story in a couple of different frames. Firstly, as a correspondent with the Hollywood Reporter reporting on the trial, but secondly, sort of reliving this surreal moment, in terms of my past life. So it has been just a wild last several weeks.
Well, no rest for the wicked. You got 5 months until the presidential campaign. Don't reckon it'll slow down after that either. So good luck. We'll see you soon.
I think so. Cheers.